Hey Met fans, Brian here with Mets Mayhem. The Mets and the A's played the rubber game on Sunday afternoon, with the Mets taking the series opener 7-6 and the A's taking the middle game 3-1. Kodai Senga took the mound for the Mets, and he went up against former Met Luis Severino for the A's. In the top of the first inning, Francisco Lindor walked on a 3-2 pitch. Juan Soto hit a 2-2 ground ball right at Max Muncy, who tried to force Lindor out at second. However, on the throwing error, Lindor was safe. We have runners on first and second, no one out. Pete Alonso came up. He worked an 11-pitch at bat. He did ground out into a double play. Jacob Wilson to Muncy over to Soderstrom at first base. So now that leaves Lindor at third with 2 outs. Brandon Nimmo then grounded out to Urshela on a 3-1 pitch for the third out of the inning. So the Mets didn't score in the top of the first inning. However, they made Severino work to the count of 28 pitches. So now move on to the bottom of the first inning. And Lawrence Butler led it off for the A's. And he fell behind Senga 0-2 before hitting a line drive just out of Nimmo's reach for a leadoff double. Senga was working Brent Rooker away, got ahead of him 0-2 before getting him on a forkball in the dirt that he was unable to check his swing for Senga's first strikeout of the game. So now we have runner on second base with 1 out. Tyler Soderstrom laid off the first pitch low before hitting a 1-0 cutter for a fly ball to Nimmo for the second out. So now we have 2 outs for the A's. Shea Langeliers grounded out on a 1-0 pitch right to shortstop Francisco Lindor, completing the play, throwing over to Pete Alonso on first base. So now we end the first inning and it's 0-0. There's a little bit of a difference between the Mets approach and the A's approach. As you can see early on in the game, the Mets are working the count. They're getting deep in the count. They're driving Severino's pitch count up. And the A's are being a little bit more aggressive. They're swinging at pitches early in the count. So Senga had a quick inning bottom of the first inning. Move on to the top of the second inning. Mark Vientos led off the top of the second and took a first pitch fastball middle of the way for a strike before watching 2 sweepers to strike out looking. Luis Torrens got his hands inside and singled on the first pitch on a line drive up the middle. Severino then attacked Brett Baty, working him inside, and then caught him looking at a questionable strike 3 call up and in. But then he made quick work of Tyrone Taylor. He got him to look at a first pitch sweeper over the heart of the plate. And then he unleashed a nasty one that started at the middle. He broke out and ended up in the left-handed batter's box. And Taylor swung and missed at that. And then he came right back with another sweeper that didn't have quite as much movement. And it froze Taylor for strike 3. So move on to the bottom of the second inning. And Miguel Andujar reached on an error by Francisco Lindor. Jacob Wilson then came to the plate and he grounded out to Baty, who threw over the ball to Acuna, who completed the double play by throwing over to Alonso. So error erased, Andujar erased. We have 2 outs. Seth Brown came up to the plate. He lined a single to Nimmo. And then Gio Urshela flied out to right field. Juan Soto to end the inning. Thankfully, we got that double play. Otherwise, possibly we could have been down 1-0 on the Seth Brown single. So we move on to the top of the third inning. We have Luis Angel Acuna leading off, and he flies out to right field for the first out. Francisco Lindor then struck out on a high fastball up and out of the zone, but has been being called a strike by the home plate umpire so far the whole game. The Met batters need to make adjustments to this. Severino, seeing that he's getting this call, will continue to go there, rightfully so. Juan Soto came to the plate. He had a ground ball up the middle, just past the pitcher. Jacob Wilson fielded it right behind the second base bag. He double clutched. He threw a bit wild to first base. However, it was enough time for Soderstrom to leave his feet. He jumped, made the catch, turned around, tagged Soto a couple steps before the bag, and that ended the top of the third inning. So we move on to the bottom of the third inning, and Max Muncy led off by singling to center field. Lawrence Butler then fouled, and he singled on a ground ball to the right side. So now we have runners on first and second, no one out. Brent Rooker then grounded into a double play. He had a ground ball to Baty. Baty made a nice play on. He threw to second. Acuna was covering. Then Acuna completed the throw over to Alonso at first. So now we have a 5-4-3 double play. 2 outs. Tyler Soderstrom then came to the plate and he flew out to Tyrone Taylor in left field. And that ended the third inning. So we go to the top of the fourth inning and Pete Alonso was leading off for the Mets. And Alonso grounded out to third baseman Gio Urshela, who threw over to Tyler Soderstrom at first for the first out. Brandon Nimmo then hit a double to left field, his third double of the season. Mark Vientos struck out. Luis Torrens then walked. Now we have runners on first and second with 2 outs. And Severino was able to strike out Brett Beatty swinging, and that ended at the top of the 4th inning. So at this point, Kodai Senga is cruising. Going into the bottom of the 4th inning, he got leadoff man Shea Langeliers to fly out to Soto in right field for the first out. Miguel Andujar walked out a walk. He fell behind Jacob Wilson 2-0, but Senga was able to get him to hit a weak ground ball up the middle. Lindor came charging in. He fielded the ball. He threw over to first base to Alonso, got the second out of the inning. And then Seth Brown flew out to Soto in right field, and that ended the 4th inning. So now we go to the top of the 5th inning. Severino is cruising himself. He induced back-to-back ground balls to start off the inning. He got Tyrone Taylor to ground out to Urshela at third. He got Luis Angel Acuna to ground out to Max Muncy at second. So now we have 2 outs, no one on. Francisco Lindor lined a 1-2 sweeper up the middle for a single. Juan Soto then hit a line drive up the middle himself. However, the ball hit Jacob Wilson's glove. It popped up in the air. He was able to stay with it, recover, catch the ball, and that was the 3rd out of the 5th inning. So now we move on to the bottom of the 5th inning. Kodai Senga had a great bottom of the 5th. He had a quick 7-pitch inning. He got Gio Urshela to line out to Alonso at first for the first out. He then struck out Max Muncy on 3 pitches. And then he retired Lawrence Butler on a line drive right at Tyrone Taylor. So now move on to the top of the 6th. It's still a scoreless game. Both pitchers are dominating. Different game plans from both teams. Different approaches by both pitchers at this point. But it's still 0-0. For the Mets, Pete Alonso led off the top of the 6th inning. And, working that count against Severino, the Met pitcher's driving his pitch count up. Perhaps he was tiring a bit. He walked Alonso on a 4-pitch walk. None of those 4 pitches were near the strike zone. He did manage to come back and get Brandon Nimmo to ground out to Jacob Wilson for the first out, but Alonso advanced over to second base on the play. Mark Vientos, was keeping Jacob Wilson busy again. Hit a hard ground ball to short. Wilson threw over to first base for the second out. Alonso advanced to third base. So now we have a runner on third base with 2 outs. Luis Torrens took an outside fastball exactly where it was pitched, and he lined it to right field for a single that broke the scoreless tie, giving the Mets a 1-0 lead. With the Mets working Severino's pitch count the entire game, the A's decided that was enough. They brought on T.J. McFarland to relieve him. He was facing Brett Beatty as his first batter, and Beatty did have a good at bat. He laid off some pitches out of the zone, hit a hard line drive to center field, but it was caught by Seth Brown for the 3rd out. We move on to the bottom of the 6th inning. Because Kodai Senga has been more economical with his pitches, he's still in this game. His past 2 starts, he's only completed 5 innings. So the Mets were looking for him to go deeper this game. The Mets were looking for the starting pitchers in general this turnaround in the rotation to pitch deeper into the game. So now we have Kodai Senga getting Brent Rooker to fly out to left field on the first pitch for the first out. Again, the A's are helping in how aggressive they are at the plate. Tyler Soderstrom then walked on a 3-2 pitch. Shea Langeliers flew out on a 3-1 pitch to Tyrone Taylor in center field for the second out. And then Miguel Andujar, again, first pitch swinging, lined out to Tyrone Taylor in center field, and that ended the inning. So now we move on to the top of the 7th inning. Noah Murdoch is in, and he's facing Tyrone Taylor to lead off for the Mets, and he starts his day off by drilling him on an 0-1 pitch. Luis Angel Acuna tried to drop a bunt down the third base line, but Gio Urshela is still an excellent defender. He made the play on it. He quickly threw over to second base for the force play. Taylor was originally ruled safe. The A's challenged it. The call was overturned. Taylor is out. So now we have Acuna on first with 1 out. Lindor then hit a line drive into the left center field gap that scored Acuna easily. Lindor coasted into second base. Juan Soto was intentionally walked to bring up Pete Alonso. And this really has come back to bite most teams so far this season. However, it worked for the A's in this instance. Alonso struck out on a 3-2 pitch that was just dotting the outside corner. So now there's 2 outs. Runners are still on first and second. Murdoch walked Brandon Nimmo, and then he walked Mark Vientos following that. So now that drove in a run. Lindor scored. The Mets now have a 3-0 lead. The A's quickly went to their bullpen. They brought on Jose Leclerc to face Luis Severino, and he managed to stop the bleeding, getting him to line softly out to Soderstrom at first to record the third out. So now we move on to the bottom of the 7th inning. Kodai Senga now staked with a 3-1 lead. He's working in the 7th inning for the first time in about 2 years. And he's still looking strong. His pitch count was manageable at this point due to the over-aggressiveness of the A's batters. And he worked a 1-2-3 inning. He got Jacob Wilson to ground out to Acuna, who threw over to first base for the first out. And then he struck out Seth Brown swinging, and then got Gio Urshela looking to end his day, and then the 7th inning. So now we move on to the top of the 8th inning. Leclerc is still on the mound for the A's. Brett Beatty is leading off for the Mets. And Beatty weakly hit a changeup right back to Leclerc, who threw over to Soderstrom for the first out. Tyrone Taylor then tripled on a fly ball to right field. That brought up Luis Acuna, and during that at-bat, a balk was caught on Leclerc for faking a throw at third base. So now Taylor scored. I'm sure Acuna would have preferred that call not been made because he then lined the single to center field. He would have had an RBI. So now Jason Alexander came on to replace Leclerc. He's facing Lindor, and he lined out to third baseman Gio Urshela, except Urshela was positioned at shortstop actually in this play, with the shortstop playing up the middle just before second base. So he was positioned perfectly for that play. Ball was hit hard, just right at someone. Juan Soto then walked on a 3-2 count. That brought up Pete Alonso. This time he hit a softball right back to Alexander, who threw over to Soderstrom at first, and that ended the top of the 8th inning. So for the Mets, we're up now 4-0. We move on to the bottom of the 8th inning. Senga's no longer in the game. A.J. Minter's coming on in relief of him. And Minter got leadoff batter Max Muncy to ground out on a 2-2 pitch to Lindor at shortstop. So that was the first out of the inning. Lawrence Butler then lined the single to center field. So now we have a runner on first of 1 out. That brought up Brent Rooker. Minter got Butler to pop up a mile high in the sky to second base. Luis Acuna was able to get under it and catch it for the second out. And then Minter capped off his appearance by freezing Soderstrom with a middle down, 95-mile-an-hour fastball. After working his way in the first 2 pitches, he must have fooled him, froze him, struck him out for the third out. So now we move to the top of the 9th inning. The Mets are still not done padding their lead at this point. They scored 4 more runs. Brandon Nimmo led off with a ground ball that was deflected off of Muncy at second, kicked over to Wilson at shortstop, was ruled a hit. Mark Vientos then lined a double into left field. Andujar was just not able to cut it off. The ball went to the wall, so that allowed Nimmo to score. Vientos cruised into second. So now the Mets are up 5-0. Luis Terrens then hit a fly ball to center field. Seth Brown stumbled a little bit on the warning track. He lost track of the ball. He took his eyes off of it. He looked away. He didn't want to get hit by the ball. It dropped in, bounced over the fence for a ground rule double. So now it's 6-0 Mets. Brett Beatty then came up and he scorched a ball 113 miles an hour off the bat into the right center field gap for an RBI triple. That made the lead now 7-0 Mets. The A's brought the infield in. Tyrone Taylor hit a hard ground ball that Jacob Wilson at shortstop couldn't handle. It was scored in error. Beatty scored. It's 8-0 Mets. Honestly, Wilson had horrible fundamentals on that play. He tried to play it on the side, possibly for a quick throw home to try to get Beatty out. And he played that completely wrong. Had he played the ball getting in front of it, at worst he would have knocked the ball down. He would have been able to recover and then throw over to first for the out. But now it's 8-0 Mets. Luis Acuna then hit a ground ball right at Muncy, who turned the 4-6-3 double play, erasing Taylor and giving the A's 2 outs in the top of the 9th inning. Francisco Lindor then flew out to Seth Brown in center to put an end to the top of the 9th inning. So now the Mets are up 8-0 going into the bottom of the 9th inning. Max Kranick came on in relief of Minter, and he attacked the upper half of the zone on the first 2 batters, getting Shea Langeliers to line out to Soto in right, and then getting Miguel Andujar to fly out to Nimmo in left. So now we have 2 quick outs. And then he ended the game by getting Jacob Wilson swinging through a 97-mile-an-hour fastball for the 3rd and final out. So the Mets win this game. Key takeaways: Kodai Senga went 7 innings. The first time he's gone 7 innings in 2 years. He had a very manageable pitch count, which allowed him to go deeper in the game. It wasn't your typical Senga game. He didn't utilize the ghost fork much. In fact, his final line was 7 innings. He gave up no runs. He allowed 4 hits. He walked 2 and only struck out 4. The A's game plan must have been to try to get him earlier in the count so they wouldn't have to see many ghost forks. But their aggressiveness actually helped him keep his pitch count low and allowed him to go 7 innings, which is a blessing for this bullpen. After the game, Senga pretty much said as much, saying that the A's hitters were very aggressive. They put the ball in play, and he was lucky that they were hit right at his defense. I think he was being a little bit modest to an extent. Yes, the A's were being aggressive, but he made pitches when he needed to. A.J. Minter and Max Kranick pitched the final 2 innings of this game, preserving the shutout and just continuing the Mets bullpen dominance thus far this season. Offensively, Francisco Lindor went 2 for 5. He had a walk, scored a run, and drove in a run for his 3rd double of the season. Juan Soto still hasn't gotten hot, but he picked up 2 more walks. That's 14 now of the season. And even though he's only batting .250, his on-base percentage is .409. Pete Alonso had a quiet 0 for 4 game. He did draw a walk. He did have some good at-bats again. He's continued to display good plate discipline. Just didn't get any hits today. Brandon Nimmo went 2 for 4. He got his 3rd double of the season. Luis Torrens has been red hot this season. He went 3 for 4, had 2 RBIs, brought his average up to .333. The combination of Torrens and Senga has really filled in well for Alvarez. The trio of Vientos, Beatty, and Acuna all had some good at-bats and showed some signs of possibly getting out of the early season funk. Vientos was playing DH, which allowed Beatty to play 3rd base and Acuna 2nd base and get all 3 of them in the lineup. Vientos went 1 for 2. He had a walk. He drove in 2 runs. He picked up his 3rd double of the season. Beatty made some nice plays in the field. Absolutely smoked the triple to right center field in his last at-bat to drive in a run. Acuna went 1 for 5 as well. He had a couple more at-bats where he worked the count deep, drove up pitcher's pitch count, and he played great defense. I'm going to continue to preach patience on all 3 of these young players. That's all I'm going to say on that topic right now. So the Mets win the game 8-0. They win the series 2-1. They now move on to play the Minnesota Twins in a 3-game series beginning Monday evening at 7:40 p.m. Eastern. For the Mets, Clay Holmes takes the mound, and for the Twins, it's Joe Ryan. I'll be back after the game to provide a recap of that game, as well as provide any other noteworthy news. But until then, Mets fans, let's go Mets!